A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala sayyidil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Inshallah, tonight we already started Surah Tawbah. I just want to give an introduction to Surah Tawbah. Surah Tawbah, it has two names, At-Tawbah and Al-Bara'a. Al-Bara'a means freed. Why this is called Bara'a? Because what the agreements between the Makkans, the infidels, that were made by the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after the conquest of Makkah. The conquest of Makkah happened in 8th Hijri, like 8th year after the migration. And then definitely the Makkah was conquered, and the Ghazwatul Hunain, which is also mentioned in this surah, which happened right after the conquest of Makkah, Fatatul Makkah. And many tribes, most of the tribes, they accepted Islam, but still there were few mushrikeen, few associators, few idolaters, and non-believers were there. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had agreements with them, agreements of peace, that shows that Islam respects everybody's religion and wants to live in peace with them as long as they do not make any conspiracies, do not make any mischiefs against Islam. So even the Muslims had conquered Makkah, and the Masjidul Haram was in their custody, and they were the caretakers of the Masjidul Haram. They still allowed the idolaters, the Makkans, still able to come in Masjidul Haram, Baitul Haram, and they can perform their ibadah, whatever they were doing before accepting Islam. So they were free. So this continued for many months, almost 1.5 years, because Makkah was conquered in 8th Hijri, and this surah was revealed in the end of the 9th Hijrah. This surah was revealed in Zilhajj of 9th Hijrah. So when this surah revealed, there are two topics discussed in this. One is that the agreements I talked about, the agreements which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made with the other non-believers, associators. They still had the freedom to go and do their ibadah in Baitul Haram, and they were able to live according to their own norms, as long as they do not make any conspiracy against Muslims. But although they were not sincere in their agreements, still the Rasulullah sallam, what he was kind, he let them do their ibadah and everything. But then a big event happened in 9th Hijrah, 1 year after the conquest of Makkah, that the Roman Empire, which was one of the superpowers at that time, two superpowers on the eastern side was the Persia, Iran, Faris, and on the western end, northwest end, it was the Eastern Roman Empire. As I mentioned in the surah previously last night, that today's Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, they all constituted one province of the Eastern Roman Empire. And there used to be a governor there, and it used to be ruled. So as they see that the Muslims are rising, nobody cared about the Arabs, the Bedouins at that time. They thought that it is their internal matter and they will be able to handle it. But when they saw that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like the Muslims, they are emerging as a power, then the world powers, they thought about this rising power, this movement, and their effects in the on the global level. So the Caesar of the Rome, he decided to make a preemptive attack on the Muslims. So they gathered a big army in the eastern province, in the Eastern Roman Empire, in its province of Sham in Syria. They gathered a big army and they decided to attack Rasulullah sallam. Somehow the news reached Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So instead of waiting for them and doing this strategy that let them come to Medina and attack us and we will fight them over here when they're here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided that we will go and fight in their home. So this was, although was a very far off place, hundreds of miles away, Tabuk, this is called Ghazwatul Tabuk or Ghazwatul Usra. Ghazwatul Usra. Usra means hardship. This was a very hard time. It was a hot weather, June, July's weather, and you know how hot it is in Arab in June, July, and the date palms were ripened, and it was time to drink, sweet water, cold water, eat date palms, and sleep during the day. This was the time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided to preemptively attack and go and combat them in their own home. So, see, in Ghazwatul Badr, there were 313 people. In the second Ghazwa, Battle of Uhud, there were 1,000 people from Muslims. Then the Battle of Trenches, Ghazwatul Ahzab, Khandak, there were 3,000 Muslims. Then Fatah al-Makkah, the conquest of Makkah, there were 10,000 Muslims. And after 2 years, in 9th Hijrah, when the Ghazwatul Tabuk, and this is the last Ghazwa of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the surah we did last night, Surah Al-Anfal, that was about Ghazwatul Badr. That is the first Ghazwa in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam participated. And this surah, Surah At-Tawbah, this is the last Ghazwa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life which happened. And you know how many companions were there? 30,000 companions. 30,000 companions from Medina. They accompanied Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they marched towards the Tabuk. It was very hard time. It was very hard to manage the camels, horses, the weapons. 30,000 army of the Muslims marched. The surah also, a very important factor came out from this surah is the munafiqun, the hypocrites. Because this was a time of a test. This was not easy. They knew how, what kind of power we are going to go and combat. This was not a kind of some private army like Meccan army. This was an empire, a Roman Empire, which is the second largest and one of the superpowers of that time. They were going and attacking them. So everybody was not ready to go. The hypocrites, the munafiqun, they became so apparent in their attitude when Rasulullah sallam called and said, we are going to go to Tabuk and we are going to fight. They made so many excuses. So this whole surah talks about it. Some people are there, they love you. They want to spend their wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their heart. Why? Because akrabu min Allah. They want to go closer to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they want to get the salawat Rasul. They want to get the dawas of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by spending their money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because the salatul Rasul gives them the peace, the sukoon. But on the other hand, there are munafiqun, the hypocrites. Even if they have to spend tawhan wa karhan, they just do it to show off, to save their faces. They don't do it from the heart. They are not fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't believe in meeting the laqa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. So they were really apparent during this time that they remained behind. They did not accompany Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they remained in Medina Tayyibah. They made so many excuses. I'm sick. I'm not feeling good. My wife has this. We know all these kind of lame excuses they made. And Rasulullah sallam, he knew that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has informed him. So, you see the whole Madinian life. This is almost the end of the Madinian life. The total Madinian life is 10 years and a few months. And this is, I'm talking about the end of the 9th year. So the munafiqun, they kept on doing their activities during all this decade, this 10 years. But this is the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exposing them in this surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the names of all these munafiqun, and he came to his mosque in Masjid Nabi, and he, such a zillat on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we gave them 2 disgraces because of being hypocrite. One disgrace was when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, and in the mosque everybody is sitting and everybody thinks he is a real believer and they're friends with the believer, they're eating, drinking with them, they're friends. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, by name, so and so, Fulan ibn Fulan, you are a hypocrite. Leave our mosque right now. You leave our mosque. You leave our mosque. By name, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to exit from the mosque. This was such a disgrace. They were so apparent to all the community in Medina Tayyibah that they are the munafiqun. They are the people who attack from the back. So this is one way. And also, all the tribes, which, as I talked before, the 2 matters have been discussed in this surah. One is the bara'atum min Allahi wa rasulihi, from those agreements which Rasulullah sallam had made with the Makkans and other Arab tribes, that they were able to live peacefully, they were able to, because they used to come to Makkah and they used to do the tawaf of Kaaba naked. They used to be naked and they had their own ways of ibadah. But Rasulullah sallam didn't forbade them from anything, whatever they were doing. He was lenient. But now, when they knew that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with all his companions, 30,000 companions, he's going to go and strike a superpower. They were sure that the Muslims, they will be perished. They will not be able to come back. Na'uzubillah, they will not be able to come back to Medina. So they became more arrogant, and they said, we don't have any agreements with the Muslims. We don't care. We will do whatever we want. So that's why when Rasulullah sallam came back, in the month of, this Ghazwa happened in the month of Rajab. And when it was the time for Hajj, after a few, Rajab, Shawwal, Zikad, Zil-Hajj. In Zikad, this surah was revealed about the Ghazwatul-Tabuk, Ghazwatul-Usra. And then the Rasulullah sallam in 9th Hijrah, he didn't do his Hajj. He did the last Hajj in 10th Hijrah, Hijjatul Wada, farewell Hajj. Only one Hajj Rasulullah sallam performed. He made Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu the leader of the Hajj. He was leading the people. Around 300 people he took, 20 camels for the sacrifice, and he was going. And the verses about the agreements, because now the Muslims came back, and all the Makkans got exposed, because they were thinking that Muslims will be perished. We'll be having no problem. They put aside all the agreements with the Muslims, and they made every mischief they could do, every conspiracy they could do against the Muslims. Now this was the time to give them the lesson. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He made the decision about the munafiqun, the final decision that they were exposed name by name, and they were exited from the mosque by the Rasulullah sallam's order, same way with the Makkan tribes. That Baratun, like we don't care about your agreements. You have only 4 months. Still look at the Sharia law. Sharia gives so much space. Although they were not caring about their agreements. You could break that agreement at any time when the terms are not fulfilled. But still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Arba'atu Asharun. 4 months they were given, even they were not abiding by. So you have 4 months, you settle down, either you accept, our salah and become, submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're good. Otherwise, you have no right to come to masjid. No non-Muslim will be able to enter the mosque now. And all the rituals in Kaaba will be according to the Sharia of Islam. There will be no customs of Jahiliyyah, the naked tawaf, and all those kind of things will never happen. So this was the decisive power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallam's final victory. Like this was the aftermath of the victory of the Makkah, Fatatul Makkah. So this is the tatamma, this is the completion of the Fatatul Makkah. That whatever was left over, it was cleaned. So this is Surah At-Tawbah. There are 2 masajid Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in this. It's very interesting. The when munafiqun, they knew that we didn't accompany Rasulullah sallallahu, and they knew that something is going to happen when he comes back. Definitely he's going to ask us and why we didn't accompany, and we have to face him. So they were very clever. So they made a mosque, Masjid Zarar. It's mentioned in the Surah At-Tawbah. The Masjid Zarar they made, and this was also in Quba, because Masjid Quba, when Rasulullah sallallahu entered Medina Tayyibah, he stayed a couple of days, maybe around 10 days in Quba. He built a mosque there. So Quran has given striking difference between those mosques. That this mosque of the Quba, which was built by Rasulullah sallallahu, usse sa'ala taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this mosque's foundations are based on the piety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the other mosque, which is the mosque built by the munafiqun, the hypocrites, they said we will have another, basically they wanted to make a center. And many people make centers today as well, They call themselves Muslims and they make centers, right? You're understanding my, to whom I am alluding. They make centers and they claim we are Muslims. And they claim we are doing the service of the Islam, but that is equal to Masjid Zarar. That's like a very good analogy, a parable for them, right? That they wanted to conspire against Rasulullah in that mosque. They wanted to make a center there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they invited Rasulullah that we have made a mosque, you please come and make dua and pray in that mosque. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned Rasulullah that this mosque is not based on the piety. This mosque is based on the facade. This mosque is for disruption, for derailing you from your purpose. So and again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the mosque built 9 years ago, right beside that mosque, because that is the mosque which deserves you to be there, because that mosque is built on taqwa. The other surah there are many other verses in surah, many other topics discussed, but surah is long. But these were the main theme: Ghazwa Tabuk and the finishing, confiscating the agreements with the Makkans. These were the two main topics, and the exposure of the hypocrites, munafiqun, from Medina Tajbah. Also, there is a brief description of when Rasulullah Sallam, he was going to Tabuk. This was a very hard time. The superpower is waiting for you, and you don't have the means and weapons, and also not enough food and cavalry and the camels and horses. And we know that Sayyidina Usman Ghani, Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq brought all his wealth, all he has earned throughout his life. So this was that Ghazwa. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded Rasulullah sallam that, don't worry, this is not a time harder than the time when you were exited from Makkah. When you were made to leave your own city, and there were only 40, 50 people in the beginning, right? So this time is not harder than that. So there is one verse which talks about that. And in that verse, we see that Sayyidina Siddiq Akbar Radiallahu Ta'ala anhu is with him in the cave of Saur. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Sani isnaini huma fil ghar. He was one of the two who was in the ghar. This is for sure, all the Mufassirun agree that this refers to Sayyidina Siddiq Akbar Radiallahu Ta'ala anhu. The other surah which will be just a brief 5 minutes about Surah Mubarak, next surah. Also in this surah, there is one verse which talks about the zakat. Who are the deserving people for zakat? Innamas sadaqatu lil fuqara, the poor people, wal masakin, helpless, wal amilina, administrators of the zakat, wal muallifati qulubihim, and the people who become new Muslims, they revert, so they need your help. So zakat can be used for their their benefits. Wa fir riqab wa fil gharimina, and for the people who are indebted, who have debts, not the debts because they drank or they did gambling, but they did their best, but still they are in debt. It happens. So you can help them with the zakat. And zakat you can also give to your brothers and sisters. Only you cannot give zakat to the people you are born from, like your own parents, and the people and the children you are born from you. That is the only people you cannot give zakat. But you don't have to mention to your real brothers, sisters, friends, your relatives, cousins, that I'm giving you zakat. Give them self-respect, and just give them money, and you can count this as a zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is faridatum min Allah. This is duty upon you. This is must upon you. We all know. Just briefly about Surah Mubarakah Yunus. Why it's called Yunus? Because there's no name is mentioned of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam. He's one of the prophets, and he was around from 860 BC, like 860 years from before Jesus alayhi salatu wasalam until 760. So that is the time when he came, and he was in the city of Nineveh, which is in Iraq, and he preached to his nation, and he did his best, but still they didn't believe. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that I'm going to send the torment, I'm going to send the punishment. So, but before this happened, before the wahi, the revelation, the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, he decided to leave the city. And he was in a boat, and the boat was drowning, and they said that there is somebody who is culprit, and we are going to look for it, we'll search. And they did the draw. They did draw 3 times that who could be the person that because of him we are drowning in the sea, in the water. So all 3 times the name came for Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam. So they threw him in the sea, and probably he was engulfed by a whale. And there he recited. This is not in this surah, but Surah Anbiya. In Surah Anbiya, his name is mentioned and all this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if he was not among the Musabbihin means he recite the tasbih, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin, then we will never free him. He will be there in the belly of the whale until the day of judgment. So that's how powerful the zikr of Allah is. The zikr of Allah saves you from all the calamities. But the main topics discussed, Sayyidina Yunus, no doubt there is a name, because in one raku, There is a ashara, the surah alludes to him, alayhi salatu wasalam. But the main topic discussed in this surah, and this surah is one of the last surahs revealed in Makkah. This was revealed almost in the 12th year of the Meccan life. Rasulullah spent around 13 years, 12 years and a few months, because he left Makkah in Rabiul Awwal. He reached on 12th of Rabiul Awwal, he reached Medina Taibah. So almost 12 years and a few months he remained in Makkah. So this surah was revealed in the last year of Meccan life, because Rasulullah had made all his arguments. The Quran, many surahs has been revealed, and Rasulullah had preached a lot, and knocked at their doors, knocked at their hearts, but still the Makkans were not opening their hearts for Iman. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the story of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam. There are three main topics discussed. Again, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Tawheed. The second topic is the Risala. All the disbelievers, they have the problem in understanding that why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, an orphan who has no wealth, who has no, the worldly status is not that high, why he is chosen to be the prophet? Why somebody, Qaryatain Azim? Qaryatain means Makkah was a big city, and another big city is Taif. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't choose one of the people, Minal Qaryatain, from these two cities? Why he didn't choose one of the chiefs from these two cities? So they always question that. Why he chose an orphan from Makkah to become the prophet, the last prophet? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that this is my prerogative. This is my will, whomever I want to best to. In Allah hastafa. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses whoever he wants. This is nobody's prerogative. It's not the wealth, it's not the status which brings you. This is not kasabi. This is a wahbi thing. Kasbi thing is you get through your efforts. No, Nabuwa is through wahab. This is Allah's fazal. So this surah talks about that. And also, one last thing I will discuss. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, second thing they pointed out is towards Quran. They said that the Quran is not a wahi. Quran is iftara. This word is used many times in this surah. Yaftarun, iftara. You are making up, fabricating the Quran. This is the fabrication and the stories you are learning from the people of the book. You are the people of the book who teach you the stories of the old prophets, and then you just make up the stories, fabricate the stories, na'uzubillah. This was the accusation of the Makkans to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Iftara, that you are making up, you are fabricating this Quran. This is not revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them a challenge. First challenge was in another surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is making up Quran, who is a ummi, unlettered, he never went to any school, he had no ataliq, no teacher, no mentor, how can he make this beautiful Quran on his own? How can he fabricate it? So you go ahead, you are the Fosaha, you are the Udaba, literary, you're the big poets, you're such a history. You call all the other people, they have no language. You are Arab and the rest is Ajam. Go ahead and make a book, similar to Quran. This was the first challenge. Then the second challenge comes, which says that you go ahead and make 10 surahs. And then the third challenge comes. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ, Surah Baqarah. The same challenge has been repeated in Surah Mubarakah Yunus. Same. That if you have some doubt, go ahead and bring one surah. Not the whole Quran, bring one surah in comparison, in competition to this. If you will be successful, you call everyone, go ahead and call all the societies, all the literary societies, your poets, all the people, educated people, bring everybody and go ahead and make a board and bring one surah. But they were never able to. So this is the biggest challenge till date, that our book, Inna nahnu nazzalna zikra wa inna lahu lahafizun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the protector of this Quran. And Quran is the biggest mu'jiza of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that in this month of Ramadan, which is the month of Quran, Shahru Ramadan, unzila fihi al-Quran. So this is the introduction of the Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that we keep on understanding Quran every day. Because Quran opens up its secrets, it's never ending secrets. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that the children who are born raised here, they approach the Quran and they bring new meanings for their life. Sallallahu ta'ala ala khairi khalqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله